So we did the 10 Commandments last week, right? So the part we're going to be is in Exodus chapter 20, well, really 21, and chapters 21, 22, 23, and 24, those 4 chapters that we're in. This is the first time in the Old Testament, the Bible, where you get into just good old-fashioned law, just law. This is the kind of stuff that people's eyes will glaze over. They're like, what in the heck? And either they don't understand the law and they just skip past it, or they try to find a spiritual meaning in it and they misapply it, or they put themselves under the law, which we talked about in Galatians you can't do, or they argue with the law, and we're going to see some passages that seem problematic. And so this is complicated. It raises, one, why are these laws in here? What do they mean? Why is these random passages? They don't, for example, we're going to see when it says, don't boil a goat in its mother's milk. What does that have to do with anything, right? So we're going to see those kind of passages. And then, so why are those in there? What, if anything, do they mean to us? If they don't mean anything to us, why are they in there? If they do mean something to us, does that mean I can't boil a goat in its mother's milk? What do we do? So most people don't know what to do with this. They just, I ain't reading that. Or they do their Bible in a year thing and they go, okay, I read that. Whatever. Let's get back to a story. So I want to walk you through the 4 chapters, and let me start with a technical background that you would never know if you don't go to school and study commentaries. And this is something you're just going to, you have to either take my word for it or go home, Google this, and you're going to see what I'm talking about, okay? Way back in the day, 2nd millennium BC. So we're talking like between 2200 BC and like 1500 BC, that time, 1400 BC. So 2000 years before Jesus came along, all right? Back in the day, what they would do is, like, when a country like Egypt took you over, or Babylon or Assyria, when a king conquered you, you were called his vassal. And he made a treaty with you. He would either kill you and take your land, or if he let you stay in your land, he would make a treaty with you. And he was your sovereign, or your suzerain, and you were the vassal. So we have all of these documents that we found from the ancient years that date back to this time period called suzerain vassal treaties. The suzerain is the king. The vassal is, they're the ones who do what they're told. So the suzerain says, these are all the blessings I will give to you. I'm going to take care of you. And as the vassal, this is what you have to do in exchange. If you do what I tell you to do, I'm going to take care of you. And if you don't do what I tell you to do, it'll be the end of you. So we have all sorts of these suzerain vassal treaties. Anybody who was alive back then would have known them. The covenants here in Exodus and again in Deuteronomy are just written as a suzerain vassal treaty. That's just what you're reading. So if you look, the prologue is typically what happens in a suzerain vassal treaty. So a king, he would start with a historical prologue. This is why the king did it, and how good he was, and how awesome the king is, and how he took care of his people. And then he would give general stipulations of the covenant. This is general points, and then he would give specific points. These are examples that you need to follow. And then after the specifics, he would then give all the blessings, and then failing that, all the curses. Well, that's exactly what you have in Exodus 19. You have this stuff about how I, the Lord, brought you out of slavery. This is all the good things I did for you. That's your historical prologue. Then you have the 10 Commandments, which are your general stipulations. Now you have what section we're in now, which are the specific stipulations. And it's going to end with the blessings section. This one doesn't have the curses, the blessings section. And they would always end with a meal to ratify. We're going to see this is ratified. So the law, I'm going to make a theological point here, the study, and then theological point at the end. Here's the point. Israel is under God's sovereignty the way a king rules over a people. They have responsibilities to God. That's the whole point of this whole big section. They have responsibilities to their king. That big theological principle should directly come across, because even if this is not our vassal treaty, do we have responsibilities to King Jesus? Yes, we do. That kind of goes to your question about, well, if it's not law, why should I do these things? Well, because as a vassal of Christ, or the New Testament, as an ambassador of Christ, there are responsibilities that we have so that we can do the work that he's called us to do. And just real quick, what are some of the things that Christ is, what is the function of the church? Why is the church here? What is God doing in the church today, right now? So what's he doing? Like, what's the big purpose of the church? Is it just to go and listen to some cool praise music and feel good? That's nice. What is the church for? To spread his word. Spread his word, so to grow, to bring more people into salvation, the kingdom of God.
Help those with less than us.
Yep. To make the world a better place, salt and light of the world. Right? If we violate what God has called us to do, will we be successful in doing those things? No.
Like
so
Cosmo was saying earlier, he feels like when he gets close to God, but he's only going to church Sunday. Then he comes in here and calls people names.
Right.
You're so bad, bro.
So that's the general theological point. Whether any of these individual laws we have to keep, the picture is just like Israel was under, they had responsibilities and there was blessings conditioned upon that. So do we. Well, where do we get our responsibilities? Do we get them from the law? No. Where do we get them from? Then we get them from the New Testament. But the reason we need to understand this is we can understand what Israel's function was. And we're going to see some things that do come across into the modern world. Okay. I could say more technical background. I'll bore you. I won't bore you further. I'll stop at that point. So if you go to chapter 21, we are now getting into the specifics of the law. And what he's going to do is he's going to talk about, he's going to start in verses, and I'm not going to read a verse, but verse in chapter 21, starting in verse 1 all the way down through 11. He's going to talk about Israel's responsibility to the vulnerable people among them, which is amazing because the laws of the governing nations had very little. If you were vulnerable, you got no help. So off the top, this is like, you're going to take care of the people who are the most vulnerable. And it's going to start with a vulnerability that may surprise you. Verse 2, if you buy a Hebrew servant, or some translations say slave. So we're going to start with the rights of slaves. Now, some people get irritated. They think the Bible should just outlaw slavery as a whole. Maybe we can do another study another day on why slavery exists, but this was a common institution. We're going to see this in a minute. So we can talk about it in great detail later, maybe after. I don't want to get too far because that could be an hour conversation by itself. But slavery was a common institution. But I want you to notice what God is going to do. Most back then, slavery was what's called chattel slavery. If they owned you, they could do anything they wanted to you. They could beat you. They could kill you. They could rape you. They had full rights to your body. You were just property. God's like, no, there are going to be times when there are people who are serving you in a forced capacity. They're very vulnerable, right? Because they literally have no rights. How are you to treat them? If you buy a Hebrew slave, thank you, sir, very much. Notice this. He is to serve you. How long does the text say in verse 2? How long? Look at verse 2. How long does a Hebrew slave to serve? 6 years. And in the 7th year, he shall go out free for nothing. So Hebrew slavery is not, it's not forever. Other Hebrews. And let me just jump right to a big moral question people have here. And I don't want to spend too much time here. If we need to, we will. They weren't. So this was not where I walk into Seth's house, kidnap him. We're going to see this in a minute. And you're my slave now, dude, whether you like it or not. What happens is, suppose I fall in hard times and I cannot pay my bills. No one can relate to that. And I'm literally starving to death because there is no government program. I mean, literally, I'm going to die. I have no food. The crops are dead, right? I can go to Cosmo and I can say, dude, if you take care of me, I will be your slave. I will sell myself to you. You're
Years.
6 years. And you said, if you can afford to buy me, you bought me. And now I'm your property for 6 years. Now I have rights because of this passage we're saying.
But before you wouldn't have had?
Oh, no. In other countries, I would have no rights. If I sell myself into slavery to Cosmo, it's permanent forever, and he can do anything to me, no limits. So the first is to recognize in this day and age, this happens to people. So it's an economic reality. So first, it's a minimal 6-year thing. And then it says if he comes on his free alone. Now, there's this passage that goes on to say, you can read it, that Cosmo may give me a wife. You may say, Chris, you're a pretty good servant. You've been here 2 years. I trust you. Here's one of the girls that I own. I want you to get married so you can have a kid, because that's good for a lot of reasons. Now, at the end of that, my term, keep in mind, Cosmo gave me this woman as a wife and the kids. Now I have a choice to make. I don't take this woman that Cosmo gave me often away, because that's his property. Sorry, that's the language of the scripture.
Right.
So I get a choice to make. I can now go and Cosmo can keep the children so they can help work his property, or I can sell myself to him permanently. I still have rights of we're going to see he can't kill me and things like that. I have a choice. I can be, at that point, I can go and there's a ritual. I would go down to the judge. They would take my ear, put it against a door handle of Cosmo's house, and he would basically do a piercing here. And I was indentured to him for life. So I love Cosmo. I love the family. I'm going to serve him the rest of my life. That's a choice to make that I get to make as an indentured servant. So I have a choice here. I can leave or I can stay for life. The point here is that we're giving these people who are falling on economic hard times, this is the way they chose to give them rights and take care of them. Verse 5, if the servant declares, I love my master, I love my wife, then it says he can go before God, the judges, pierce his ear with an awl, he's to be a servant for life. We'll see later on when it comes to injuries, the limitations of what Cosmo can or can't do to me as property. But the point is, slavery, servitude is not permanent unless I want it to be. Okay. There's another way. So men tended to get sold into slavery because they thought they can't provide for their families. Women tended this to happen too, but women were typically not out doing the kind of heavy lifting that men did. So in people really struggle with this. This is just the text. Verse 7, if a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as a male servant does. So this is a large picture they had. Women in those times didn't go out and own their own property and run their own businesses. That wasn't the way the world worked. Maybe we wish it would have been, and we can say, thank God now that it is that way. But I think God is extremely practical here. Because remember, we live in an age back then, no government support for anything. Men, think about the way men are, especially back then, right? What kind of protection does a woman have? There's none. So women the daughters were their father's responsibilities. And then they would become their husband's responsibilities, and they cared for them. And what did men do to care for their wives? What'd they do? What were they responsible to do? Everything. They're in the garden, they're out there growing, they're hunting, they're going to war. It's this really strong picture of the man's job is to provide for and protect his family. So I sell my daughter. Now this is interesting. If she does not please the master whom he has selected for, so Cosmo, I'm in trouble. I tell you what, you can have my daughter. Basically, you're now her father. You're going to protect, you're going to pay me. Now you have bought a daughter that you can take care of. That's the picture here. You get to buy a daughter. Keep in mind how vulnerable women are. All right. Now, here's what you get to do, Cosmo. You can marry her off to one of your sons.
What's that?
You can marry her off to one of your sons. And then your son takes care of her, right? That's the purpose. You're not allowed, the Bible says, if he selects her, it says, let's see, in verse 8, if she does not please him, he must let her be redeemed. So if my daughter just doesn't do a good job and you're like, I can't handle this girl, she got attitude, then you have to allow her to be redeemed. I have to be allowed to come back and buy her back from you. You're not allowed to keep her and beat her. He has no right to sell her to foreigners. Can't sell her to foreigners. Why? She's a fellow Israel, a fellow Hebrew girl. You can't do that because he has broken faith with her. If he is given to her son, and it goes on to says, so suppose Cosmo says, well, I'm going to take Chris's daughter. I'm going to buy her. I'm going to give her to my son. But then a few years later, this girl's got attitude. I'm going to give her to somebody else. I'm going to give my son to somebody else. I want my son to marry this other girl. He still has to take care of my daughter, his daughter. You're not allowed to do that. So again, do you see, and again, I just want to emphasize some of this language, and people will attack the Bible for this. Some of this language feels harsh from a modern perspective. But do you get a sense that God is trying to provide protection for a very vulnerable population? Mm-hmm. Slaves and women are very vulnerable, and God's trying to provide protection for them. So this is the first stipulation he gives. We're going, the first stipulation is taking care of the vulnerable among you, not abusing them, not taking advantage of them. It then goes into personal injuries. Look at verse 12. If anyone strikes a person with a fatal blow, they are to be put to death. If you kill someone, they die. Period. There's no question about it. Why? So we've gone from protecting the vulnerable to now we're going to deal with crimes against life itself. Cosmo hits me and I die. Sorry, dude, you're going to be executed. Now, there was an idea in the culture back then that if Cosmo killed me on purpose, he could go to a sanctuary city. That's what they're called that. And they would never, he wouldn't be killed. God says, not good enough. If Cosmo kills me on purpose, he can go to a sanctuary city. He still gets to be executed because I don't mess with that. We don't kill people. Why? Because human beings are made in what? The image of God. So it doesn't matter. So again, God is elevating the value of life here. Not only verse 15, anyone who strikes their father or mother is to be put to death. Why? Again, we're elevating life, honor. To strike your parents is a picture of dishonoring the authority in the most fundamental level, which means ultimately you're dishonoring God himself. God is interested in authority. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death. So go back. Can I go and kidnap Seth and make him my slave? I do. And what's going to happen? I'm going to get executed because I'm not allowed to do that. We don't give people prison sentences for kidnapping. You kill them, you execute them. You don't do that. This is true whether the victim has been sold or is still in the kidnapper's possession. So if I go and kidnap Seth, knock him out, and I sell him to Cosmo, I don't have him anymore. They find out I did it. Guess what? Off with my head.
Step 2 for buying them too.
The text doesn't address. The assumption would be that he didn't know, and if he did know, there'd be issues. This is another point. These are, even though these are specific, they're not going to every detail. These are representative laws. This is interesting. If two men are fighting and one person hits another with a stone or a fist, the victim doesn't die, but they're confined to a bed. The one who struck the blow will not be held liable if he can get up and walk around. So we're fighting. Cosmo does one of his right crosses, boom, breaks my face in 27 places. Listen, if I can get up and move around, I heal. He has to pay for my wages, my lost time off work, but he's okay. If I die, guess what happens? Off with your head. What's the point? What is the point? What is he does? We're not violent. We're not attacking. We're not killing each other. We're going to value life, which is, and again, this is God is a God who values life. Now let's go back to slaves. Anyone who beats their male and female slave with a rod. Now you're allowed, they were a corporal punishment society. I'm his slave. He tells you something. I choose not to. Guess what he's allowed to do? He spank my butt. He can tie me up and he can beat me. That's allowed. Corporal punishment's allowed back then. But if he beats me so bad that I die, what happens? You die.
I can do almost everything. I just can't shoot you.
You can't kill me.
Shall die or be killed.
Anyone who beats.
And he die under his hand, he shall be surely.
Okay, yeah. So in that case, he is, yeah. So what's going to happen here? So this is, no, thank you for pointing that out. I was thinking about later on. What that, yeah, that's right. So you're not going to die if you're not going to be, if you're in the process of punishing. Now, if you just in anger previously are fighting me, but now if you're punishing me, keep in mind, I've sold myself to you as a slave and I die over the punishment, you're going to be punished. The text doesn't say what. And then you will have also lost basically someone that you bought and paid for.
So if I buy you and for some reason I beat you up and then you die.
If it's punishment, right.
So I get punished too.
You get
And
punished
one of my
too.
slaves, I have to let it go.
Well, no, you lose me.
Oh yeah, you're gonna die already.
Yeah. So the point is, it's practical. Don't do
You're
it.
bad. So like, that's fine.
So, but again, the point is, you don't. Again, we're valuing not only we're valuing life here, all right, and frankly, you want to value your own investment.
All right, that's true.
Now, here's a very controversial verse 22. If people are fighting and they hit a pregnant woman, now here are two translations. One says, and she gives birth prematurely. The other says, and if she miscarries. So there are two views. Basically, the picture, without reading the details for time, is that if we're fighting and I hit a woman in the course of our scuffle and the baby is born, what
There's a T.
Yeah.
Today.
the first of all, if there's no serious injury, then okay, you're going to be fined, I believe. Yeah, you're going to be fined. There's no serious injury, no harm, no foul. Okay, you're going to be fined. Cops is going to pay a fine because he beat me up and actually not hit my wife, and my wife gave birth but the baby's okay. We're all okay. You're going to pay a fine. Again, we're valuing life.
But punished by the woman's husband.
Yeah, and in this case, the husband gets to fine you. Ha! So I get my revenge.
Was that a little the same? Like,
So
somebody,
suppose me and you are going to fight, which would never happen because I value my life, and my wife is pregnant.
Are you registered weapon?
I'll read it.
And
And in the course of the scuffle, you throw me and my wife tries to catch me, right?
Oh, yeah.
And she gets hit and then she has the baby. The baby survives. You get fined. I get to tell the court what I want you to be fined for.
You tell the judge like,
Yeah.
what do you want?
And of course, it has to be honest. However, if the baby dies, or if there's any serious injury at all, now it's the law of lex talionis, life for life, eye for eye, foot for foot, hand for hand, tooth for tooth.
So you mean like if you lose a hand, with my hand too? Ooh.
If the baby dies in the process, that has a miscarriage, then now what happens to you? So what's the point in all these really weird laws? What's the general takeaway? We can talk about it. What's the takeaway of all these?
So keep each other.
Value life. That's the point. That's what this is all getting at, is valuing life.
were they not valuing life up to this point?
No, the surrounding cultures. No,
Kill each other. Like,
No.
whatever, I'll kill somebody then.
sure. In fact,
What about Israelites?
Right.
and Pure Israelites?
no, they were previously like they lived under the code of Hammurabi and the code of the Egyptians. They didn't have it. So there was this idea of law of lex talionis, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Some people think that's a terrible law. That law was meant, so the laws back then, among other countries, was if you hit me and take my eye, I can kill you because revenge comes back twice on you. well, then you're going to come back. I kill you. Your family's not going to come kill me. You're going to kill me and my whole family. Well, then my family, this is how
Never stops.
insults pile up into wars. So the law of lex talionis, eye for an eye, says, look, if Cosmo knocks out my eye, I can take his eye, but no more. Proportionate. This is the principle of proportionate justice. Sure. And now Jesus will later on say, let's be gracious in the midst of that. But for now, this is a world of proportionate justice. So do you see what we're doing in these laws here? We're trying to establish laws that protect the vulnerable and that respect life. That's the idea. And you can go in detail of all these. There's more about if a bull gores somebody and injures them, then you're going to pay for that. It's okay, fine. It happened once. It's an accident. The bull gores people multiple times and more than one person dies. Guess what? So there's you're going to die a lot in the law. Yeah, because we're trying to respect life. Don't kill people. That's really the whole point. This is a whole million ways of saying don't kill people, which you would think is pretty crazy. They have to have that law, but they did. Because it was a violent world back then. Where I was like, well, why do I need to be told not to kill people? Back then, they needed to be told that. Because again, back then it was power. All that mattered was power. Well, we don't live in a power-hungry, well, we do, but for us, we live in a nation of rights. Rights would have been a foreign concept to them. Now, I don't have a lot of time to go over the personal injuries, but I just want to generally oh, wait, that was where I was just at. Yeah, that was, so again, injuries, all that. After you move, so we've moved from crimes against life and against the body. Now there's protection against property, crimes against property in the next chapter, which is chapter 22. Right now, if I were to steal, I've been picking on Cosmo, I'll keep picking on Cosmo. If I were to steal I mug him and I take $1,000 from him, what's going to happen to me? No, in today's modern society, I go to jail. How does that help Cosmo? How does it help Cosmo if I go to jail?
Feeling like you've got.
Yeah, this is a nice emotional thing, but does it help you? It don't help nothing, right? So listen to how, listen to how practical God is. This is so wonderful. 22 verse 1. Whoever steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it and sells it. So I steal his sheep and I slaughter it, I sell it away. Have to pay him back 5 heads of cattle for every cattle or 4 heads of sheep for every sheep. In other words, if I steal, I've got to pay it back 4 or 5-fold. So now we're respecting your life, we're respecting your property as well. You get that? So there's this, that's the general idea. And down in verse 3, anyone who steals must make restitution. Now, what happens if I steal Cosmo's sheep? I sell it. I get caught. All right, Chris, you got to pay Cosmo 5 head of sheep. I don't have the 4 or 5 head of sheep. Now, well, what do we do? What's the verse say? I'm down in the end of verse 3. What happens at the end of verse 3? If I can't pay back, what do I do? Yep. Then they sell their souls into slavery for the theft.
I like that.
So again, I'm protecting your property. Now I'm your slave. Now I have all the rights of a slave. But this is what's happened, right? I'm paying off my debt. And if the stolen animal is found alive, then I have to pay you back, but now it's just double. Don't steal people's stuff or respecting people's things. It goes so far as if I have animals that are grazing and they go into Cosmo's land and start grazing on his land, I got to pay them for the grass they ate, for the grapes that they ate. I can't my animals keep eating your stuff, right? We're recognizing that. So the whole point of this whole section of this, and it's a whole bunch of things about, I'm going to respect Cosmo's property and he's going to respect my property, which you would think is an obvious thing. Is it? Do we not live in a world where people vandalize and steal people's property all the time. Why? Why do people vandalize each other's property and steal it? What's at core? Why do you steal my stuff? And why do I break your things? At core, what's at the bottom of that? It's fun. Evil. Do I care? Do I care about you? Yeah. It's just disregarding. It's just robbing you of your dignity. So noticing what the purpose of the law is to elevate the dignity of not only life, but the very stuff that you have. I may not attack your body. I can't even attack your stuff. Now I want to do this section verse by verse. We'll do it quickly. Go to chapter 22, verse 16. So now we've gone from crimes against life to property, now against society at large. Verse 16, if a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married, so this is not rape. He has seduced a woman not pledged to be married, okay? Not betrothed to be married, right? So she's single. And he sleeps with her. He must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. So I take a girl out, I have her getting a good time, I get her feeling good, I sleep with her. Guess what I just bought myself? Whether you like it or not, and now she's your responsibility. Now she's your responsibility. Because again, you take a girl's virginity, what does she have to offer? But in this, she said it, not me.
Not me.
But you get the point, right? No, seriously. If her father, however, can refuse and say, I'm not selling you to him. So that's fine. You don't get to marry him, but I still got to pay the fee.
Well, and who says how much that?
It's whatever the price was at the day. Those things varied. Verse 18, do not allow a sorceress to live, presumably a sorcerer also. Someone casts magic, witches. Why? God doesn't allow that among his people. If anyone has sexual relations with an animal, they are to be put to death. I just saw a tweet today on Twitter today, X, whatever it's called now, people defending bestiality.
I know.
What the hell?
I just saw it today. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord must be put to death. Do not mistreat and oppress a foreigner. Now you would think a foreigner among you, they don't have the rights of Hebrews. They're
Talk about me here.
foreigners, right? I can mistreat them. What does God say? You're not allowed to do it. Why?
See that? Or you leave? No, wait. I'm sorry. You leave. You didn't hear that, right?
He's getting out of here.
No, I'm foreign, so you need respect.
Also, it's like, since you're foreign, it's okay.
So
I didn't read that.
that's right. That's right. So we're not allowed to pick on foreigners. Doesn't that have some relevance for today? Not that we're under the law, but what is God suggesting? Among his people, what's he suggesting? How does he want his people to treat others?
Respect.
Set apart, you know, it would be like.
Right. So I'm not going to tell you that if you mistreat a foreigner, you're violating this verse. But isn't this saying something about the way God wants his people to be? Do you think God is tolerant of people who mistreat citizens of a country who mistreat foreigners? Hey, Jay, do you think God tolerates that? No, he just doesn't. We'll come by the end. Come by the end. Jay, just so you know, if you're listening, we're in Exodus chapter 22. How about this? Verse 22. Do not take advantage of the widow, the fatherless. Oh, taking advantage again, vulnerable people, right? Verse 25. This is important. If you lend money to one of my people, so to a fellow Israelites, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest. Why do you think God doesn't want Israelites charging each other any interest whatsoever?
So I don't think that.
That makes it harder to pay back. Right. He's encouraging generosity. You should help each other. You are not a way for me to make money off of. I'm here to help you. You're here to help me. We're not here to make money off of each other. Do you make money off of people you love and respect and value? Or are they just mere customers? Are they mere investments? See what I'm saying? Don't blaspheme God. Don't even curse the ruler of your people in verse 28. Are they always going to have good judges and kings? Don't even judge the ruler. Why? Who's really in charge in the end? Don't do it. Do you get a sense that God is valuing respect, dignity? Do you see that? Is that coming through loud and clear in these laws? Don't hold back the best of your sacrifices in verse 29, your grain. And then you have to give me, in fact, the firstborn of your sons, the firstborn of your cattle, the firstborn of your sheep, etc. Verse 31, you're to be a holy people. Don't eat the meat of an animal torn by wild beasts. Throw it to a dog. So if I'm out tending my sheep and a wolf comes out and tears a lamb to pieces, do I go and say, well, I guess I'll have dinner tonight and try to salvage it? No. Why not? Why waste the meat? Who are you? You're a holy people. You are children of God. You're going to settle for the leftovers of an animal meal? Really? You're going to settle for leftovers? You see how much dignity this gives people? Are you really going to settle for leftovers? You could do a whole sermon, isn't it? Are you going to settle for leftovers? That's the whole point. Throw it to the dogs. Let the dogs have the leftovers. Let me take care of you. The last section I don't want to spend a lot of time on is still about society, and then at beginning of chapter 20. What's this? My phone isn't paying attention. 23. Don't lie in court. Don't lie in court. Because again, now you're perverting justice. If you lie in court, in fact, I do want you to look at verse 4. Not only are we not mistreat people, look at verse 4. This is so crazy. If you come across your enemy's donkey who is wandering off, you return it. If you see a donkey, someone who hates, and that donkey is fallen down under its load, do not leave it there. Be sure to pick it up. Help them with it. What is he saying here? What's he saying here?
Help each other.
Help each other. What if you don't like each other? What? Help them anyway. Don't deny justice. Don't accept a bribe. Don't oppress a foreigner in verse 9. You know how it feels to be foreigners because you were yourselves foreigners and slaves in Egypt. So we're going to do the last section. What do you take away from this whole big section? What's the point of all these laws against protecting the vulnerable and protecting rights of life rights and protecting property and not being unjust? What's the kind of the takeaway of all this? What are you seeing in these laws?
Respect.
It's just a ton of respect, right? And again, do we do this differently in 21st century America? Yeah, sure. But that's the culture they lived in back then. And they didn't have, I'm going to say this again, Social Security, and they didn't have Publix down the street. How does God go about establishing a culture of respect and honor like this, which everyone gets taken care of? That's the idea. This is how because God take care of each other because God does, right? Now you can read the next two sections on your own. I'm just going to tell you the point. The Sabbath laws and the annual festivals at the end of that chapter, the middle of that chapter rather, these are religious laws. So God's giving a bunch of civil laws. Now there's religious laws. There's a way I want you to worship me. 6 days you're to work, take a seventh day, no break. Take a seventh day, take a break. No work on the seventh day. I don't care how much you think you need it. Take a break. Let me take care of you. Give your slaves a day of rest. I'm telling you, this is how you worship me on the seventh day. And then there are 3 feasts I want you to go to. And all those feasts have to do with the planting season and the harvest season. They're all about recognizing that God has provided for you. Their whole calendar is built around God's provided for me in the planting. He's provided for me in the harvesting. And so we're gonna go and thank God for these things. Okay. So the worship of God he's prescribing the law here is a thanks-based worship. Gratitude for God. Don't you think if you're constantly being thankful for all that God has done, doesn't that do good for your for your soul? And then at the end, we're going to get to verse 20. Now, we've gotten through the stipulations. Here's the blessings, all right? See, I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you along the way, to bring you to the place I have prepared. Pay attention to him. Listen to what he says. This is the angel of the Lord. Do not rebel against him. He will not forgive your rebellion. We're going to see that in the book of Numbers, since my name is in him. If you listen carefully to what he says, you do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies. I will oppose those who oppose you. Does that sound good? My angel will go ahead of you. He will bring you into the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. I will wipe them out. So who's going to fight the battle for them? God will. Conditioned upon what? What's this conditioned upon? Their obedience. Do not bow before their gods. Don't worship or follow them. Demolish them. Break them into pieces. Worship the Lord your God, and his blessings will be your food and water. I will take away sickness from among you. There'll be no miscarriages. Your land will not be barren. I will give you a full and a healthy life. And he goes on to promise more of those blessings. God blesses obedience, but it's not just any obedience. It's because he's called you to he's called them to a purpose, to be a kingdom of priests. If they function the way God has called them to function, is God not going to bless them that they can function even more? Jesus says in the Gospel of John, those who are fruitful, I prune them so they bear even more fruit. This is conditioned upon obedience. Are they serving to be saved, or are they saved so that they can serve? Why should they be obedient? If they're going to go to heaven anyway, why should they be obedient? It's right there. Because if they're obedient, what does God do? Blesses them greatly and mightily. Yeah. So again, we're not under the law, but don't we have the same promises in Christ? If God treated people in the Old Testament that way, he does the same thing with his church today. There are blessings for obedience. And if you rebel, there are problems with it. And again, the rebellion doesn't mean you're going to go to hell. The rebellion means that there's going to be serious and harsh discipline. And we're going to see in the book of Numbers when they all die in the wilderness. Let's quickly do chapter 24 and we'll be done. This has a really cool passage in it that I think most people miss. It's just a cool aside. So after all this, the Lord said to Moses in verse 20, chapter 24, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, the 70 elders of Israel. You are to worship at a distance, but Moses alone is to approach the Lord. The others may not come near because he's the chosen one, and the people may not come up with them. So the people are way, way far in the camp. The elders come, and then Moses and Aaron go up further, all right? Or Moses alone goes up further. Moses went and told the people all the words of the Lord. They responded, everything the Lord has said, we will do. This is the second time they've done this. Are they going to do everything God has told them to do? No. So when God judges them, do they know what's coming? There's no way around it, right? Then Moses wrote it down. He got up early the next morning, built an altar. And basically, without reading that, he takes an animal sacrifice and he's going to dip it in blood. And this is really cool. He is going to, again, they say a third time, we'll do everything the Lord has said. Verse 8, Moses took the blood, he sprinkled it on the people. This is the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you. So he's put the blood on the altar that represents God, and he's put the blood on the people, which represents the people and God have been united by a blood covenant. Is God going to keep his side of the bargain? Or will God break his part of the bargain? He's going to keep his bargain, right? What about the people of Israel? Are they going to keep it or not? No, but it's a blood covenant. So it's really important. Again, all this is standard suzerain vassal treaty stuff. Now look at this in verse 9. Then Moses and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu, the 7 went up, and they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of lapis lazuli. Your translations may have something else. Sapphire, as bright as the blue sky. But God did not raise his hand against these leaders of Israel. They saw God and they ate and they drank. Imagine eating a meal in front of God himself. It's a fellowship meal. We are in fellowship with God. God is in fellowship with us. We are now going to do all that God has told them to do. So there's this big, beautiful picture of now God, at the end of this, God and the people of Israel have been united in fellowship, where they are literally eating with God himself.
God.
Yes.
So yes, someone had.
So the standard explanation is that this is a theophany. It's a vision, because this is like the 5th or 6th place in the Old Testament where God appears. So we call this a theophany. This is a vision of God. In the New Testament seems to be talking about seeing God in all of his glory. That's the standard response. Do with that what you will. But the point takeaway is that God has now established a relationship with his people, and it's a real covenant. It's a real relationship. God is the king. They have some things they have to keep, and we can talk about the laws in general, but the point of the laws for the people of Israel is a respect of life. It's a respect of property. It's a respect of God himself. And that just goes way back to the creation story of Genesis chapter 1. We're made in God's image. So you may not be under the laws, and you're not, but does it still remain true that you are to respect life, that you are to respect property, that you are to respect people, that you're to respect authority? Does that still remain true?
Yeah.
Does it still remain true that if you're obedient to God, that he will bless you in some sense, and that he will use you to accomplish the purpose he has in your life? Yes, that's why you're obedient, because you're in fellowship with God and he calls for it. Or you can shrug your shoulders at your king and say, I'm not doing what you said. Try it. Let me know how that works out for you. The Bible's not threatening you with hell. It's promising you blessing because of the covenant he's made with you. And he's also saying, or you can go the other way, and I'll address it. That's the point of the book of the covenant. At this point, Moses is going to leave and go into the mountain for 40 days to get more laws we'll talk about next time. Spoiler alert, what are the people going to do while Moses is gone for 40 days?
Get a calf.
They're going to worship a golden calf. Not a good start. Well, he agreed to make the calf. They asked him to make it, and he agreed to make it. But again, this is where the golden calf story starts to make more sense. Why that's so crazy. He had just given them all these stipulations, and they literally just, I don't think so, but that's a good question. But no, we just said twice, 3 times. We'll do all the things you said. Yeah, you're gone for 40 days. We're going to come with a new God.
And they were still getting manna and quail.
Yes. So take from that what you will, but I think when you read the law, that's what you're doing. You're looking for the large principles that it's doing. And again, there are people who non-believers who think, well, the Bible doesn't say slavery is evil, therefore the Bible is false. My response, do with this what you will, is God is less interested in social revolution than he is in dignifying people in their state. Now, is it better to have a world no slavery? Yes. And through Christ and the church, did we accomplish that? Yes. What did God do at that time? He took the people where they were, and he dignified people who had no dignity. That, reading it in its context, should tell you, what does God care about? Dignifying human beings, dignifying people's property, dignifying the society, not perverting the society. And while I'm not under the law, those might be, if God cares about those things, maybe those are things I should care about too. That's how you read that's how you read the law without being under the law. I hope you don't feel like I'm putting you under law. I'm not trying to. I hope you're seeing some principles of things God cares about. And then the Holy Spirit can lead you, because you're not under law. Well, God, you do care about life and dignity, and you care about society. So how would you lead me in light of these values? And let the Holy Spirit lead you into that. And with that, I'm done. Thoughts, questions, comments, cries of outrage.
I don't know, but after.
All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. I'm not going to turn the video off, but I'm going to end the recording here.